So what we're going to be talking about today is not only just the tools that I currently use that are out there in corporate finance and accounting, but also personally, how to make sure that yourself aren't falling behind in kind of what's going on with technology. And then also touch on a little bit on the enterprise side as well on how to help your companies with with those similar transitions. Um, just getting over to the first slide, introduction. I think, for those of us who do work industry, we've noticed a shift in the last couple of years, initially starting with companies that are working with kind of on-premise accounts, then moving more towards cloud-based and all the major, SAP, Intact, all the one, even Outlook, have everyone's kind of moving away from on-premise and the desktop applications more to on the cloud for more power, then also more memory and more flexibility as well. And the reason I kind of was inspired to do this talk more so was just to touch on the sense of urgency there is right now with technology and in the finance and accounting industry, and a sense of urgency that people need to have with themselves as well. We're moving for the personal accountant or finance professional, corporate finance professional, moving to a place where, maybe a lot of your time was spent with data entry or just, setting up data models or data analytics, where a lot of this stuff can be automated with workflows that are no code that are built into the systems themselves. Or if it's not a no code system directly built into the system, it's very just easy, Python coding or just maybe some VBA or just Excel work to automate these things. So it's going to be less of our time as you go forward with, doing data entry and more strategizing and more actually making decision that leads to better outcomes. So it's very important that, if over the years your main thing has been just, actually plugging in data entry or, creating reporting and not so much the second end of that is to start to make that transition as fast as possible. And that might be, something I did back then was just learn how to automate my work so I could just naturally move towards that. You're going to want to start doing that as soon as possible because you don't want to, Copilot and things like that are getting innately built into Microsoft. So very soon, you won't be needed as much to do just the hard data labor where a lot of that stuff could just be automated. So as quick as possible, you want to help, make that transition before that transition kind of leaves you behind. And then the second part is just talking about some of the major technology and trends, on a personal side, but then also on an enterprise side, right? For the personal side, there's things like, machine learning, there's things like workflows, there's things like, ChatGPT, Excel, Python, all these other things, Power BI, where, or Tableau is really great for you to learn how to use those tools because, those are tools that span across industries, span across companies. And no matter where you are in that, you'll always have somewhere to go and you won't get left behind, right? So if, God forbid, your company ever defaults or, maybe for some odd reason don't work anymore, it's very easy for you to transition or do your own thing on the side, to help people because that's just a skill that no matter where you are, it's going to always be valuable and going to help you scale and move across different industries and platforms. So we'll touch on those two things today. So the first thing we want to do is talk about how to personally protect yourself and make sure you're staying relevant in this new era. The first thing, as with all first things, is based on your mindset. And the first couple companies that I put here, I don't own any of the rights to any of these companies, just some of the stuff that I use that, I wanted to help recommend and push a point. So I really like, these are some companies in terms of learning and development that I really like at the first three here, which is the CFI, and that is the Corporate Financial Institute. Not only do they have classes and courses on just helping you build out your technical skills, such as, modeling in Microsoft Excel, Power BI, Tableau, R Studios, Python, Power BI, all that stuff is on there, but they also have, if you're interested in just other accounting and financial tips as well, and courses for you to take if you need to learn how to do evaluations, if you need to learn more about FP&A, need to learn more about corporate finance, and also that CFI is an all-inclusive. It has everything you need to help kind of push your skills forward and make sure you're upscaling as the industry is moving forward. The next one is Enterprise DNA. That one's more data analyst and data scientist focus. So that's more if you want to upskill your technical skills. I highly recommend. And both those are just subscription based. So you pay a monthly fee and you get, thousands of classes and courses you can take on a monthly basis. And for myself, that's has really helped me transition into understanding how to model and value things. Is I learned a lot of these skills from these courses and others, but these are just the two I recommend. And then there's Udemy, which I think a lot of people are popular with. It's more so, I believe, you pay, per class and per lesson. It's not a subscription based as the first two, but I highly recommend CFI Enterprise DNA if you're looking to upskill, and it's going to be very important. I just came from the Dreamforce conference that I put down there, and I was listening to the CEO of AMD and the CEO of NVIDIA speak, and they both mentioned Moore's law, right? And that's just the concept that every couple of years things are going to double and scale up on its own. But right now they're saying AI, data, and technology. This is the first thing that we've seen in history is actually scaling up faster than Moore's law, right? So the longer you guys wait to just kind of get started, or the more your companies wait to at least get the foot in the door and get started, you're gonna get left behind, and you'll end up at a point where you really can't catch up, right? Or the people that you're competing with are so far ahead of you, you're trying to catch up, and they just what they're doing with 30 employees is taking you 60 employees, right? What they're doing with 100 employees is taking you 500 employees. So I think starting now and starting this lesson of trying to improve yourself and learning how to upskill and learning these gaps that you may have is going to really help take it to the next level. And then I put Dreamforce on there as just a way to understand that there's a lot of conferences and things that you can go to and network with people that are just extremely helpful. I think I learned more about these agents and AI things that are coming out in that week I was at Dreamforce. It was very, very impactful. Was able to do an AI certification out there as well. So it's just really, really great to just get around people who are working in the space. Did a lot of round tables and had discussions with them on what their companies look like. Those are just things you could take back with yourself and meet a lot of great people out there. Next, I think, is to start leveraging AI and automation. And I separated the two. I think a lot of times we like to just jump immediately into AI and all these stuff that we're hearing, but it's important to understand that a lot of the work that you do and a lot of the stuff, it can be just fixed with automation, right? Especially in accounting and finance, right? If you have invoicing process and you need it, if it's over 200K, it needs to go to the CFO. If it's between 200 and 100K, it needs to go to the COO, and under 50 needs to go directly, let's say, to a project manager. You don't have to have someone in AP manually sending those out. You can, in SAP, for example, you can create automatic workflows that are sent out the invoices through an approval process based on monetary thresholds, right? Or maybe you want to set it based on circling vendors or certain accounts. It's not necessary to have an AP person actually looking through these infos and then sending it manually. You can set up these automatic workflows, which can also be attached to an automatic invoice implementation system, that the moment an invoice comes in through your inbox, it automatically goes into the system. Then that system automatically puts it through the proper workflow for approval. And then now you freed up those AP people to actually do the more hard work of saying, getting better at your cash turnover rate and making sure that things are getting paid ahead, or making sure they're pushing out where vendors is, and then your cash cycle gets improved, right? So the whole thing is leveraging these automation tools and AI tools so that you actually have more time to do other things that can be more value added to the business, right? And then next, there's definitely some AI tools you want to get into. I, highly recommend, in my opinion, ChatGPT. I know there's 100 others out there. And there's some things you don't agree with ChatGPT is fine, but find one tool that you like and really learn how to use it, right? So I like using ChatGPT personally, because I use it for my general purpose, right? So I might turn on the data analyst tool and ChatGPT to really start working on an Excel formula, or maybe I'm doing something in Salesforce. I'm doing something in SAP where I want to, on the back end, figure out how to workflow, and ChatGPT is able to walk me through by the proper prompting, walk me through everything I need to do to go from, if I'm don't know how to do something at all, to I want to do some high complicated flow in Salesforce, I can do it in ChatGPT and it'll talk me through. Or if I have a general question about an accounting principle and I needed to, find me some documentation online so I can actually have a relevant source to say, hey, this is how I think we should treat this, and I'm talking to my controller, ChatGPT is able to help me and actually help me find the proper papers online and scrape the internet, or even simple things like helping improve an email, or maybe drafting a memo or anything of that nature. It's very, very helpful, and I highly recommend finding a tool you really like, especially in your field. that you want to use in our industry, because it's general, because you could do data analysis with it and also help do some research on some principles. I highly recommend it. It's been useful for me, but it's also important to know, don't put any private information in it, right? If you're going to have a question about your company, remove the company name. If the project has a project name, put project X, or, project one. Don't actually put the project name, don't put addresses, and try to stay as general. If you're publicly traded, you got to even have even more protection around that. Make sure you're talking to your compliance people on what can go in and can't go out. And if they don't allow it, there's even like an API that you guys can do on the back end to connect it. But just, especially if you're publicly traded, or if you guys have a compliance, make sure you talk to them first before putting any company information in there. And then the next thing is just branding yourself a person with your age. And I think that's important, is you want to be known as someone who knows what they're talking about, right? So in your company, make sure if they have a tech team, I highly recommend you join the tech team, right? It's 60% of CEOs say the technology ideas only work if the finance team is a part of it, right? That was a study IBM did. So I highly, highly recommend, if you aren't part of it and no one from your company's on the tech team, to join the tech team, right? Just get on it, understand what's going on in your company, and see how you can add value, right? Very, very important, right? And then, like I said, I just got a certification in AI at the Dreamforce conference. Little things like that goes a long way, right? So now you show that you're not only just a finance and accounting expert, but you also know things about technology, and you know how to apply that to your work. And as things move on, and especially they're really focusing hard on getting AI into our industry as predictive, right? As in generative AI really takes over our industry, then you really want to get ahead of it before that happens. Because right now we're more in a predictive stage, right? Where, you can forecast out numbers, but now you're seeing, you can put something in ChatGPT, give it very little, and it generates brand new ideas, right? It's to the point now where for minor data entry stuff, or if I need to clean data, I'll give it to ChatGPT and say, hey, organize this. If it's all transposed one way and I don't want to copy paste, and I tell it transpose it for me, clean it up. Like, it'll do that for you. So that's your main job. You really don't want to just be locked in on that. So I think the same people are really afraid that maybe AI is going to take their job, but it's really going to be someone using AI that's going to take your job, right? Because I could be honest with you, my boss often asks me, what's the output? Why is there so much output? And it's, you will increase your output significantly. You'll be able to do the job of what, 3 people can do with just you, right? You'll be able to do the job of multiple departments with just you, right? If you know how to prompt and use all this stuff correctly, and, figure out automation tools that are just the low level, busy work that you're doing to automate that as fast as possible. So highly recommend that. And on the side, those are some of the brands that I like, right? And not fully recommended them or anything of that nature. I don't own anything, but it's just some things that I personally use that I can speak to, if you guys have any questions after. So the next thing is not only helping your company thrive, not only helping your personal self thrive, so you can get ahead. I think if you're in an organization, if you're an entrepreneur, even if you're, in a company, you could be an entrepreneur and really help. If I know a lot of companies are still really just behind with their data and still kind of not on cloud-based systems like that, you can really, set yourself apart and help set your company apart, so you guys can at least guarantee you're here, or help guarantee that you're here for a longer term with some of these enterprise systems. And what we realized not too long ago, some of the systems that we're using, we weren't even fully utilizing their capabilities, right? So I think step one is look at what your company's currently using, and really make sure you're getting you're using it to its full extent, right? If you have SAP, if you have Intact, or you have any of these, you have Salesforce or Dynamics 365, any of these tools that you have, just make sure that whatever's in your contract, or whatever features that's in your contract, you're actually using it till its full extent, right? Get the most out of it that you possibly can. SAP has great workflows built in. They have great invoice uploading built into it. It has AI built into it. The more you use it, it starts to get very predictive with automatically implementing your invoice information for you. So if it gets the same invoice from the same vendor, it'll start to pick these things up and kind of put that information in for you. So, make sure you're fully utilizing what you have. And same things with some CRMs like Salesforce. You can create automatic activity pickup. There's so many great things you can do that you guys might already have access to, right? But a lot of that's going to be based on getting towards more cloud technology. If you do have a lot of on-premise systems, I know a lot of companies are starting to move away from that. So I would recommend getting towards more cloud, get more powerful computer, things of that nature. Next is just data analytics. Data analytics is very important, and sometimes, finance and accounting, people that like to use the word terms, that's not my job, but I think the better you can get at data analytics, the better you can get at data analytics and using a lot of these systems, it'll help you a lot, right? Even simple as Excel, right? Typically, if you're in finance and accounting, maybe only Excel really to just, look at your GL, look at your journal entries and do simple, sum and if and, VLOOKUPs and simple computing stuff. But I highly recommend, you really get the most out of even Excel. Even I have Microsoft up there because I think, many people we all have access. If you work, you pretty much have access to Microsoft. We just don't use it fully. Like a lot of people don't know that Power Query is something that's built into Excel and built into Microsoft that'll literally completely change the way you look at data, right? You can create a query that automatically, as long as you put the original input data in the same exact format every time, it'll literally run automatic processes for you every time in the same way. So if you clean every single month, you're cleaning data exactly the same way month to month, and you're doing the exact same thing over and over and over, you can just create a Power Query where literally you just upload the data and everything that you do every month, it'll just do constantly for you on its own, right? So it literally you just hit refresh and then it'll automatically run those queries. That's if it has to transpose something, if that needs to combine two separate data sheets, if it needs to clean something, if it needs to separate, if it needs to get just one section of a column out. If you're doing that same thing over, it'll do it. If you need to filter rows, you're doing it all over, it'll do it. And literally every time you need to redo it, just hit refresh and it'll run on its own. So, and Microsoft also has things like Power BI, it has things like Power Automate, where you can kind of automatically create workflows, maybe from an email or things of that nature. So highly recommend just getting the most out of what's already available for you. It'll go a long way. So that's on data analytics side. I already talked about automated routines. Next is I put Planful and JetX on there. Again, don't own those tools, just some things that I've used that are very helpful. And these are more on the FP&A and reporting functionality. And these are great because they connect directly to your ERP like SAP or Intact or something of that nature, or even if you're doing like an export out of it and uploading an Excel sheet, what it'll do is same thing, you upload the data in the same way, you create a hierarchy, you create connections so it knows that, GL code 1005 goes to current assets, right? And now you just export your GL, upload it into a plan for JetX, and now your monthly reporting is done. And it's really that simple, right? And a lot of the time, how much should we just spend on time? It's just literally, converting a GL into some type of reporting or getting our KPI reporting done. And, we're getting to a world now where literally just it can be an automatic connection, or if it's not, upload your GL and your whole monthly reporting, your whole monthly KPI, everything you need done is done that fast, right? And literally saves so much time, and you can actually spend more time analyzing the data and making decisions instead of, spending all the time actually running the report, getting done one day before it's due, and then you only have a couple hours to analyze and try to come up with commentary and make decisions where, all that should pretty much be done automatically, right? And I've been through different companies, and I've been at companies now where maybe your company's not ready to jump directly to, okay, we need to automate all this stuff. Maybe you need crawl, walk, then run. But at the crawl stage, you can still get a lot done, and you can still say you're not ready to implement an FP&A tool, you can still automate a lot of things with some of the products you guys already have, and at least create a roadmap to say, hey, a year from now, let's start getting to this because we're wasting too much time on reporting. And, it might cost 60,000, but it's less than hiring someone, paying for their benefits, paying for their 401k, when, now you could just hire one person, pay them more, make them happier, have a software like this, and now have a higher output, and you're actually saving money on SG&A because the one less headcount went towards actually a system that scales, and you can pay the one person more and make them happier. So employee satisfaction goes up while also decreasing your SG&A long term, right? So it's just so much value that can be added with these tools, and I highly recommend just, if you're finding out where your company is today, I think that's always the most important thing. Where are we currently at? Where do we currently stand? And then looking at ways to then move on from there. If there's any questions on how to make like a strategic plan like that too, I'm happy to talk through that after. And the last thing is just building a culture, right? I was looking at that same IBM study, and they came to the conclusion that people hate change. And the reason is that you got to always check incentives, right? As much as I'm talking about automating and, not expanding your teams, most people, especially in leadership positions, they get paid more the more people they have on their team and the more people they're managing, right? So if you start to create systems or processes and tools that limits headcount, right? Limits the growth of your team, but then increases the business. Increase a lot of people see that as a way for them not to move up, or maybe they'll be stuck at this position, or maybe their team won't grow, so it won't be room for them to kind of scale up. But we need to get rid of that mindset as soon as possible. We're gonna definitely, as you can, some businesses have people in my company, however, don't have college degrees yet. I think we got to a place where maybe people weren't as looking for or putting that much emphasis on a master's. I think we're also going to get to a plant where literally we're in an economy where people are just getting paid for the value that they add, and strictly that. So as much as possible, it's a paradigm change, right? Because we've lived in a world where, hey, I can only get promoted to me, or I can only move up based on me if I'm managing people. Even now, people ask you, have you managed people? And it's like, well, no, but I increased my company's profitability by 30% while only increasing SG&A by 5. Like that goes a long way. And those are the type of conversations that AI is leading to now, where it's like, okay, maybe you do spend $100,000 on a platform, but hey, you didn't have to hire 2 people. And because you didn't have to hire 2 people, SG&A went down. Now you're able to scale your business more. So those are a lot of the conversations I know we're having. And something I tell them is like, hey, you're better off spending this 150 on this and then not hiring 2 more people, right? It's not necessary. So highly recommend you guys start looking into that. And just to recap on a few points, especially when we're talking about technology, I said it before, crawl, walk, run, right? I think crawling is most important to see where you're at, be honest with yourself, right? Do you know a lot about technology? You don't. Maybe you're already an intermediate, but what's that next thing that you can learn, or is there any practical skills you can do? Because like, say if you're not a type of person who's in the weeds or building things day to day, you can still, as a leader, use ChatGPT to change your stuff. You can still use these other A2s to do workflows. You can still, create automatic email templates, right? Or have templates saved that you keep getting the same question asked to you over and over. You have templates saved that you can maybe just paste and respond with in the same way, right? So as much as people push delegation, right? I think there's going to be a new one, automation, right? Not just delegate, but automate. There's many, many things we can automate. So know where you're at. The next step is to know after you know where you're at, see what steps you have to make to improve, and then actually start implementing this stuff. And don't just think everything is just about AI. You hear AI, generative, predictive, but there's a step before that, automation, that a lot of companies skipped over because time is moving so fast and technology is improving so fast that I don't think companies fully got into the automation and workflow stage before they started jumping to AI. So I would highly recommend to just look at that and see how you can make improvements. It can really change you. Same thing with action steps for your personal and growth. Same thing you're going to do for yourself. Say where you're at. I think you do the same thing for your organizations, right? If you guys still on an on-premise system, that's something to talk about going to a more cloud-based. If you guys don't have BI and you don't have FP&A tools, I think it's something to talk about as well, right? Same thing with your marketing department. Do you guys have a marketing cloud? Like, see where you guys tech stack is currently today, and see how you can make those next improvements, right? And at least get the conversation started. Like these aren't, I would highly recommend, it's not just something you want to move fast, but you don't want to rush, right? Because shortcuts and trying to go fast in this is actually leads to less long-term gain, right? Do it correctly, and correctly in a way that's something that's well thought out, because you also got to think about how all these things are going to speak to each other, right? So if you're going to use Salesforce, maybe you want to use Tableau instead of Power BI, right? If you're going to use Microsoft Dynamics, maybe you want to use Power BI instead of Tableau. So I think it's just make sure that whatever tech stack you're going with, make sure these things all work with each other. And if you already have a CRM system in place, realize how that's going to talk to your ERP system. Just want to make sure that all these things flow together properly. You don't just randomly start picking things and randomly start getting things to go with. And just a final thought, I had a quote there. He's like, the future belongs to those who prepare for it. And I think we're in a stage now, it's very important to not be scared or not want to, run or not want to turn a blind eye. to the technology and things that are coming out. Because I think that as much people try to paint a negative narrative, like, oh, it's going to take your job, I think your biggest concern is someone using AI taking your job, right? So the person who is enthusiastic about it and the person who is willing to learn about it and, go mess up and make mistakes, those are the people who, we look back 10 years from now, and it's exactly what the CEO of NVIDIA said, is that the next 10 years are going to be probably some of the craziest years we've ever seen in our lives. And we can't really fathom it because it's just the way technology is improving and the way computing power and everything that's coming. It's like, it's significantly going to change everything that we do. It's going to revolutionize everything. We already have Copilot in Excel. We already have Copilot and Power, like all these things. So most people already have been exposed to some sort of, if you're in corporate, some sort of AI assistant. I think that we just aren't using it. Like, a lot of people probably don't realize that there's a Copilot icon at the top of their screen in Excel now to the right. Like, it's there, right? But you're just not utilizing it. So that's everything I had today. Now, I wanted to save this last point for questions and just to have any type of open discussion that anybody wanted to have. So happy to take any questions.
So, Christian, I did drop a couple questions in the chat if you want to take a peek at those. And if any other questions come in, feel free to address those. Phenomenal presentation. I'm curious to hear how you respond to these, given your expertise. And like you said, you're coming from Salesforce, right? The Dreamforce conference. So you were seeing what's being done as far as at the cutting edge. So I really want to hear some of those challenges that you might have even heard of. Maybe if you and your organization didn't run into any in terms of adopting some of these technologies.
Yeah, I think so. The first one, and we had a roundtable about actually just the difficulties. I think the number one difficulty is people that aren't aware of what they had. Like, say, for instance, someone has Salesforce or SAP, like they buy the software because maybe for a particular reason, right? They wanted to get all their data in one place, and they buy a particular package, but don't realize everything that the packages comes with, right? So a lot of these platforms would do what they call contract audits with you. And when they do a contract audit, they'll sit down, they'll walk you through all the services that you pay for, and then explain how your team can actually put them in place, right? So that was one of the issues we had, is where we were paying for things, we didn't realize everything we had. Because these softwares too, now that they're cloud-based, they're constantly updating, they're constantly improving, like every second. So there might be some updates that came through and you didn't have time to read all the updates, but now you have access to some predictive AI that can forecast your pipeline and you don't realize it, right? So I think important is to know what you have, know what you currently have in your stack, and know how to use it. And then two, the second biggest issue that people spoke about was, a lot of the leadership not being in tune with what's going on within the weeds, where leadership might hear, a lot of talks on, from big executives, from the CEO of NVIDIA, and they just kind of want to run to it and implement it quickly, but they don't really have a full understanding of where their data currently sits or how the platforms currently are. So they're trying to run to something that they're skipping over steps. And this is something that you can't skip steps, right? You truly can't. You have to actually do everything the way it needs to be done. And in this game, doing cheap shortcuts will actually hurt you in the long run. So those were the two biggest things that came up. Yeah, and I see this next question here, Jay, where you had what challenge? Okay, I answered that right. Yeah, that was the biggest thing. So in terms of digital transfer.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. I appreciate that, man. Are there any other questions that come to mind for guys out there?
Do it.
I'll answer to. I saw you mentioned data security. Yes, it's
yeah, that's a big one. You talk about Salesforce, CRMs, and financial data for sure.
It's huge, and the reason I'm happy Jay brought up and I mentioned it quickly is also is important to know is like how these AI models and these machine learning models work. They get smarter off our information, right? So especially if you're a company out there who wants things private, I would highly recommend, especially now that ChatGPT has memory, right? It saves things that you say to it and things that it learns from you. It'll tell you right there, memory saved. So just be very, very careful what you put into it. And that's why I highly recommend, if you guys have a compliance department, talk to them first, and make sure they're okay, legal team's okay with whatever you're putting on there.
Christian.
Hey, David.
How's it going? Thanks so much for the presentation. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And congratulations in advance for the upcoming nuptials.
Ah, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my question, so I have about three questions, and they're really,
Mhm.
we're in a sort of same field. Um, and I wanted to know from your perspective, what challenges do you see around like big data? Because one of the things that we have at our company, we have an issue with uh, is data sanitation in terms of migrating toward those automation, uh, or you leveraging AI for automation and some of those other tools.
Mhm.
We employ SAP for the general ledger. We use PeopleSoft to pull information from there, run reports, and that's an Oracle-based tool. We use Oracle for our budgeting and financial reporting. But the challenge is when you do exports and you pull those data elements, there's just so much disparity among the transaction fields and what is input by the accountants when the transactions are processed or booked, and then the AP team when it comes to reporting and
Mhm.
facilitating payments. And so talk a little bit about some of those data challenges, not so much the data entry, but sanitizing the back end data for use, because a lot of times the AI tools function on structured models.
Right. So yeah, I would say, and thank you for the question. And as you know, like a lot of it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? So
Yep.
something that we do in two things, I would say, because I deal with the same issue where sometimes it almost seems like people are just dropping in information to kind of like if a field's mandatory, right? And they're busy, they kind of want to just drop a data point in or do it really quickly and move on with their lives, right? Not so much realizing how important that data goes in the long run. I think
Yep.
there's two things we could do. We have a lot of discretionary reports. So what that is for us is, okay, let's say, we have a invoice, right? And I pull the cash forecast every week and it's looking at it. It's like, oh, hey, it's a report that'll tell you, okay, this was posted today. The due date says it's due 7 days from now, but all our terms are at 30. So that discretionary report will let me know, like, hey, why was something posted? Its due date is less than 30. Was either posted late? Is it the wrong due date? And that would like just open our eyes to go dig into it quicker. So before that, it gets to a point where like, maybe we're putting in our forecast or we're digging into like the report will let us know, right? That hey, you have certain things that are violating these certain rules that you have, right? Same thing for us, like if we're in construction business and you have a milestone that we know happens after, like financial completion milestone happens after MC, but the date is showing as before, right? There's a report that'll let us know, like, hey, this date is off. These are all the projects in the system that are not following this particular data rule that you guys have, right? And now that we can just go to that report that we call a discrepancy report and see like, hey, these are all the data fields in your system that are violating these particular data rules. And then we can immediately follow up with the person or immediately follow up with the team and say, hey, this is something you guys need to look at and correct, right? And then the second thing is that we use a lot is validation rules. And those validation rules help prevent, like, yeah, I know you said not the input, but the validation rules help prevent incorrect inputs that we have to deal with later, right? Like if the system won't let you do it, like it'll tell you before you enter, hey, you have to have a PTO date that comes after the NTP day. Like what you're trying to enter doesn't make sense, and the system won't allow it, right? If a project's if hey, you're entering an invoice on a line item that doesn't have the budget, you can't enter this invoice, or you need to increase the budget. Like it's a things that'll just prevent people from doing incorrect data entries is also very very helpful as well.
Awesome. That's helpful because what I'm trying to do over the next 3 months is do some workflow and process reengineering and take advantage of some of the tools. Because you mentioned it, I mean, like and I think Jay asked the question about the transition. And
Mhm.
so we our tech stack is humongous and we have all these different tools, but you know they're not being used to
Yeah.
the extent that they could be. And then we have, I don't know if you ever heard of Zycus, but that is the our like procurement and sourcing tool. And
Got it.
then invoices are routed through that. Once they're processed, they hit the so AP processes it and then it hits the GL. and on down the line. And so between that workflow, there's so many different gaps that could be improved and within the process. And that's a good point.
Do you guys have
I'll take that.
documentation at all? Like a workflow documentation?
That's a great question. I pinged the accountant. So we had an executive all-day meeting yesterday. I wanted to go to the secondaries, but that was at 11. Our meeting was like all day, so I couldn't make it. But anyway, um, yeah. So the accounting team is some coordinating with them. They have it specifically carved off. So there's a whole lot of silos at the company, but they have their own processes and procedures that is separate and apart from the FP&A group.
Mhm.
And so they do exist, and it's just a matter of coordinating with
Yeah.
them
The reason I mentioned, because that's very helpful. It's seeing it on paper. I think for me
Yep.
personally, it's always very helpful just to see it on paper. Because you guys, I don't know if depending on how your workflows work, you could have workflows that are like interrupting each other. Right.
Exactly.
So it's very important to like have it all on paper and be able to trace and know, okay, this is how this flow works, this is how this flow works, right? And then you guys have a process too now. Before you guys create new workflows, you start signing off on them and agreeing them on a team, then adding them to documentation, right? Because you guys could have really probably improved your efficiency that doing that alone, seeing what you guys have, maybe getting rid of some and just creating more subflows within flows where it all flows in together. I think that sounds like it'd be real beneficial for you guys. Yeah, I would definitely take a look at it. You guys could, I think that'd go a long way for you guys.
Much appreciated. I think that the last question was, and this is a technical question, and so before, so my new title now is like finance lead of subsidiary apps. So it's slightly different than when I first started. But when I first started, I worked with a guy who is now in he's a director of our like med econ group and enterprise analytics. And basically what they do is they take all the data that we have in our data warehouse and all of that and run reports. And he uses SAS to pull all the data together and generate these various reports. However, the question would be from a technical standpoint,
Mhm.
like linked tables, and you mentioned like Power BI and all
Mhm.
those things. So if anything with any of the tables in the background
Mhm.
change, like it doesn't matter if you're using Microsoft Access, Power BI, SAS, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
If any of those change, then there has to be a human involved. And so what's your perspective on that impact for AI? And then let's say you do bring on a certain tool, AI tool, and you can reduce your overhead. So you have these tools, and now you reduce your FTEs by, let's say, you have 5 and then you have 2.
Mhm.
Well, so like what would be your perspective on that piece in terms of controls or
Yeah, I think the same thing we talk about for documentation. It's very important to have change management
yeah.
so that at least whatever changes, how we're understanding all your tools. I don't know all you guys' tools, right? So understanding all the tools you guys have and how they're all interconnected, but having some sort of change management so that if they are changed, you guys have a set of processes that you know you need to follow to make all your systems stay up to date, right? So if it's you change a table name in the background and you know whenever you change a table name, these things have to happen for our systems not to break, right? And then, so what we used to do is if we did have to change something like that, maybe it's done on a Saturday morning, or maybe it's done after hours when employees aren't working. Maybe do it in a dev environment first, have it change, see that it works, know what you have to go through, and then bring that into production environment after, right? But I think having some sort of change management documentation that, the software engineers or the data guys or everyone who's involved on the tech team is aware of and knows how to follow, and then make sure things are getting tested in the dev environment first before production. And things should flow very well. But I think it's going to be particular to the tech stack that you guys have, right? Because if you have some newer systems, older systems might not be as flexible, right? So it's definitely understanding what you guys have, having some agreed upon process for change management that you guys all follow, and then just following it to a T.
Awesome. You said a word with change management. That is huge.
Yeah, it's and I know documentation is boring and it's it's not something that a lot of people like to do, but it's just important because God forbid the person doing it leaves, right? You don't want the company to stop. And a lot of small companies, even mine, we're still like building out documentation and stuff because it's just something that a lot of startups or newer companies who aren't in their mature phase doesn't usually have. But it's so important, right? Because the system can never stop regardless of who's running it. So
Awesome. That's it for me.
anyone have any other questions? All right, Stanley, how's it going, man? Sorry you just joined. Sorry you missed the whole presentation. I can send you the deck later if you want.
Yes, please. I apologize for running late. It's Saturday morning, you know how it is sometimes. But I did appreciate the questions and your responses, and I'd love to review the deck. We can always touch base at some point if I have any questions.
Yeah. Cool. Is there any platforms that your personal company uses that
No, actually, we outsource all of our accounting. My company is a startup, and
Okay.
we are, sort of in that early phase. We'll be hopefully growing over the next 6 months to a year, at which time we'll likely need to put in more than just sort of consultants and start putting in place the people who will be able to do all the things that you're talking about. I can follow at the high level, but once it gets into the weeds, it's time for me to turn it over to the professionals.
and as a startup, like you said, it's probably a big need for just not keeping headcount low. Is there a lot of AI tools you guys use now to try and make up for the gap of maybe not having a 100-person company?
Person company, right? No, we're not. We haven't really embraced AI to that degree, and I don't think that the sort of bookkeeping / accounting that we have right now is sophisticated on that level. We will be wanting to do that as we move forward, and certainly if we decide to make our company a commercial company rather than just a venture-backed development company, I can see that being essential that we put in place all those sorts of tools, including leveraging AI.
Yeah. And it's also, I know we're talking about finance accounting, and it's also real helpful for a lot of other job functions as well.
It's not like they aren't all integrated, right?
Very helpful in all facets. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can appreciate that.
So yeah, this time is left had no more less to present. This time was strictly leaving for questions. So yeah, if you guys have any more questions, fire them away. If not, yeah.
I do have one more, and forgive me, I was trying to type your response. I know it was around rules, and so leveraging those accounts. So I reached out to the accounting person, and they have their resource for them. It's like, they're on an island. And so we're gonna circle up next week to go through. She's gonna share with me those processes and procedures and all of that, so we can nail down some improvement areas.
Great.
But you mentioned rules and validation, and so I know they probably have that on the AP side and AR side as well as accounting, but just trying to figure out like what would be some really good places to start with the validation and rules
Yeah, I'm
that
sure.
you encounter
Yeah,
specifically.
and I think that's important.
You mentioned it, but I was trying to write it down and was too slow.
Yeah, I mean, and I was even looking because I'm sure they have some more because, like, for instance, let's say you have 10, you probably have whatever your chart of accounts is. It's good to set up where, hey, if a line item comes in from these 4 accounts, then it goes to CapEx. If it comes in from these, it goes to inventory. If it comes in from these, it's AR. Like having even those automatic workflows and validations is helpful, right? Whereas like we're setting ours up where it knows that, hey, this is one of our EPC contractors. If we get an invoice from them with this task code, it's CapEx, right? So I think there's just the use cases are endless, right? They truly are. So I think it's very important to get in with your team. And the way I like to go about it, especially if you're like in this initial crawl phase, is try to find the smallest possible problems you guys have and try to figure out how you can solve them with some technology aspect to it, right? Like automatically uploading invoices is a small problem, which it sounds like you guys already solved already.
Yep.
But just going around and I would go that way. What are the smallest problems we have, and just start solving them one by one with some technology, right? Automatic invoice processing, automatic work invoice approval, automatic invoicing for AR, cash collection, automatic emails to remind people who haven't paid, right? Sure, you can create up workflows where once a outstanding invoice is past due, an automatic message is sent out to the customer to a reminder, a follow-up to pay. That'd increase your cash collection significantly if you don't have to rely on someone from the AR team to remember or to look up that something's due, and then by the time they do it, it's been 10 days past due, or maybe they missed one. Creating some type of automatic email process that would do automatically for you will go a long way. So I would just work with the team, sit down with them, ask them straight up, like, what I like to do is actually create surveys. Like, I'll create surveys to give out to business units for them to answer simple questions like, what are the most important data metrics to you? What are some of the problems that you're dealing with, right? Just asking these various questions, hand out a survey to department leads, have them work with their team, get the information back, and you guys could at least have some type of data metric now where you can go through and figure out what's really nagging people.
Awesome. Super helpful. My apologies for asking for you.
Oh, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seriously.
Oh, and I'll give you credit too. Like, I mean,
No,
we
no,
talked
it's all
about
good,
this
man.
and
Take
we're
the
like, hey,
credit.
look,
Hey,
we
man.
had these initiatives. I'm like, yeah, this awesome guy. His name's Christian.
I'd be happy if you take the credit, man, and something good for you, man. I get enough credit at work. So
Absolutely.
cool.
Well, Christian, amazing job. If there's no more questions, we can give guys some time back. But Christian, man, that was an amazing job. Love the presentation. Very thoughtful. Great thought leadership in answering every question. Amazing job. And I want to thank everyone for spending the time here on a Saturday. Could have been anywhere, right? But you're here with Christian. So we appreciate it tremendously.
Yeah, no, thank you guys as well. Like Jay said, you could have been anywhere. So thank you guys for coming to listen to me talk. So I appreciate it.
Great work. All right. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Stay safe this weekend, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah. If you guys have any more questions, you're free to reach out to me on Slack, or if you guys didn't get my contact, I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, feel free to reach out anytime.